Today, we're looking at a purple ink by Herbin Violette Pensee. Hi, I'm Adam, and I'm an ink guy. There's timestamps down below so that you can skip around, but if you got the time, I would appreciate if you check out the entire video. Also, if you're interested, you can check me out over on Instagram, and if you're new here and like fountain pen inks, I would invite you to subscribe. In order to make sure I have a range of experience with this ink, I do the writing samples. I then put the ink into this Fountain Pen Revolution Himalaya with a flex nib to write with it for a day and take the notes for this video. In order to standardize some of the writing sample, I always use Clairfontaine, Tomoe River, and Rhodia paper. Now, more papers are tested, and they'll show up a bit later. Now, let's look at the writing sample. I picked this ink up in sample form, so it came in a vial like this. And to keep my writing samples consistent, I use a Jinhao 159 with a Goulet 1.1 stub, a Jinhao X450 with a Goulet medium, and a Jinhao X750 with a Goulet extra fine. Let's take a look at the Clairfontaine. No bleeding, no ghosting. The 1.1 has no feather spread, halo sheen, and no shade. The extra fine is lighter than the stub with no feather spread, halo sheen, very nice shading throughout this writing. It's really consistent in showing up. 11 seconds to dry. Medium is just a tad darker than the extra fine with no feather spread, halo sheen, still nice shading showing up here in the writing. 15 seconds to dry. Now the scrubby for both aren't really showing the shading, but we're getting it quite nice in the writing. Tomoe River. No bleeding, normal Tomoe River ghosting. The 1.1 has no feather spread, halo sheen, or shade. The extra fine is a lot lighter than the stub with no feather spread, halo sheen, very nice shading that does get to come through here. 16 seconds to dry. Medium is the same tone as the stub with no feather spread, halo sheen, but we do get little bits of that shading coming through, and 21 seconds to dry. Now the scrubby for both shows no color variation, although we do get that light shading in both. And Rhodia, with no bleeding, no ghosting. The 1.1 has no feather spread, halo sheen, or shade. The extra fine is a lot lighter than the stub, with no feather spread, halo sheen, a very nice shading through this writing. 12 seconds to dry. Medium is the same tone as the extra fine, with no feather spread, halo sheen, still very nice shading coming through. 16 seconds to dry. Scrubby for both aren't really showing us much color variation, although we do get that peppering of shading throughout both writings. I agree with Vita that I've learned a lot by doing multiple chromatographies. The one on the left is done the way it's supposed to be done. I put a line of ink down and immediately put it into water for 10 to 15 seconds. And we see a true purple dye that performs very consistently. The water's there and it's pushing away very light and gathering at the top. Now the one on the right that I let dry for 10 minutes before I dunk it into water, the line at the bottom where I put the ink down, you can see that that's where I put it down. It's a little bit darker, but not incredibly darker. It does make me feel that there's not going to be any real resistance for this ink. Resistance tests are done to see how well this ink can be expected to perform on the page and how hard it may be to clean from your pen. I let the smear dry for 3 days before testing it. Looking at the highlighter, the amount of blowout that's occurring here, I would not use this in a note-taking situation if I needed to go back and highlight. Water's reactivating and lifting the darkest tones, but leaving all the lighter tones on the paper. Pen flush is completely breaking it down, and it's easily showing the white of the paper coming through. Now it only took water for me to get this out of my pen though, and the 1/3 bleach solution completely obliterates it. For the inks I've tested, I have found an average viscosity of 2.5, with the realm of normal being from 2.1 to 2.9. Now I'm going to link a video where I show how I test it and how I calculate the data. Herbin's Violette Pensee has a viscosity of 1.2. making it very, very wet. To find my average dry times, I use my writing samples. And for the inks I've tested, I found an average dry time of 17 seconds, with the realm of normal being from 13 to 21 seconds. Herbin's Violette Pensee has an average dry time of 15 seconds, so despite it being very, very wet, its dry time is normal. Instead of finding inks that look like J. Herbin's Violette Pensee, I would prefer to find an ink that complements its color on the page. I went for a nice orange. I went for an orange from Elixir, Siloso, Sunset. The second writing sample is done on Apica CD, Franklin Christoph, and black and red paper. Here we're looking at Apica CD notebooks. We get no bleeding, no ghosting. The 1.1 has no feather spread, halo sheen, and no shade. The extra fine is a lot lighter than the stub with no feather spread, halo sheen, some nice spots of shading that are coming through, a light peppering, if you will, with 7 seconds to dry. The medium is just a tad darker than the extra fine, not as dark as the stub. With no feather spread, halo sheen, the shading comes through much nicer here than it has in a lot of the other samples, 9 seconds to dry. The scrubby for both is showing color variation left to right, and we're definitely getting it in the writing. Franklin Christoph paper. No bleeding, no ghosting. The 1.1 has no feather spread, halo sheen, and no shade. Although I'm looking at the E's on the end of pence and I see what looks like the tiniest bit of some feathering that is there now. So I'll take the feathering bit back. There is a little bit, it does happen. The extra fine is the same tone as the stub. No, it's not. It's a bit lighter, a little lighter. It has no feather spread, halo sheen. It does offer some shading throughout this writing. Not too bad. 5 seconds to dry. Medium is darker than the extra fine, not as dark as the stub, with no feather spread, halo sheen, no shade, 7 seconds to dry. Now the scrubby for both, left to right, does show the tiny bit of color variation. Not in the medium in the writing, some in the extra fine. And black and red notebooks, with no bleeding, no ghosting. The 1.1 has no feather spread, halo sheen, and no shade. The extra fine is a lot lighter than the stub, with no feather spread, halo sheen, spots of shading. Look at how much darker the word the is compared to the word over. 4 seconds to dry. Medium is darker than the extra fine, not as dark as the stub, with no feather spread, halo sheen, no shade, 5 seconds to dry. Scrubby for both shows no color variation, even though the extra fine did have some, and that's all that I have for writing samples. So what do I think of J. Herbin's Violette Pensee? There's a lot of sort of hate that gets thrown towards J. Herbin as being unsaturated outside of their shimmer inks. And yet here's an ink that goes down very nice and dark on the page with some very good shading. People need to take a look at this one. We're missing out. So what nib and pen are going to give you the best writing experience? A medium flow, medium nib puts down a great tone with some very nice shading, but a very wet medium pen puts down a very nice dark purple, which in this case I'm enjoying more than when it has shading. I put out a new ink review every single day, so that if you're not already subscribed, I'm going to remind you, go ahead and subscribe. Thanks for watching.